This happened to me when I was 19. It was 2017, and I was, to put it bluntly, a dumb kid. I was traveling to visit a friend, missed the last bus from the station, and didn't have the money for a taxi. My phone was on 5%, so I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I walked to the on-ramp of the highway and stuck out my thumb. I was just trying to get to the next major town about 80 miles away. It was already getting dark, around 8 o'clock p.m. After maybe 30 minutes of cars speeding past, a dark blue sedan slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder in front of me. The driver, a guy who looked to be in his 40s, leaned over and rolled down the passenger window. He seemed normal enough. "Where are you headed?" he asked. I told him the name of the town. "Hop in," he said, going right past it. I felt a rush of relief. I grabbed my backpack from the ground, got in the back seat, a habit I never liked sitting up front with strangers, and said, "Thanks so much, man. You're saving me." He just grunted, pulled back onto the highway, and we drove. He was quiet, which was fine by me. I put in my headphones, but my phone died almost immediately. I sighed, pulled them out, and just stared out the window at the dark trees passing by. We were on the highway for about 20 minutes. I was starting to doze off when I felt the car slow down and lean into a turn. I sat up straight. We were going down an exit ramp way too early. "Hey," I said. "My exit is still like 50 miles away." The driver didn't say anything. He just kept driving. At the bottom of the ramp, instead of turning left toward the lit-up gas stations, he turned right onto a 2-lane road that disappeared into a black wall of trees. "Where are you going?" I asked, and my voice was already shaking. This isn't the way. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was wrong. This was very, very wrong. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were flat. He gave this low, growly chuckle. "I'm going to take you into these here woods," he said, his voice calm, "and have fun with you." My blood went ice cold. I didn't even think. I just reacted. I grabbed the door handle and pulled. Nothing. I pulled it again frantically. The plastic handle just spun loosely in my hand like it wasn't connected to anything. It just clicked and spun. Useless. He laughed again, louder this time. "You ain't going nowhere," he said, childlike. It's a really useful feature. I just fell apart. I started sobbing, begging him. "Please," I cried. "Please don't. You can have my money, whatever you want." "I won't tell anyone. I swear I'll say I got lost. Please, just let me go." He ignored me. It was like I wasn't even talking. He just kept driving slower now, his head turning from side to side, scanning the dark woods. He muttered almost to himself, looking for a good spot. That's when I knew I was going to die. I was going to die out here in the dark, and no one would ever know what happened. He felt so sick. I thought I was going to throw up all over his car. And then I felt it, a sudden, hot and heavy gush in my jeans. It was so immediate and so much that for 1 second I thought I'd wet myself. I was so terrified I'd lost control of my bladder. It was a new layer of humiliation on top of the raw terror. I was still crying, but I kind of froze. "Primera." Looked. Dun. In the dim light from the dashboard, I could see a dark, spreading stain on my light-washed jeans. It wasn't pee. It was blood. A lot of blood. I wasn't supposed to get my period for another 2 weeks, but it had just happened all at once. I didn't have a plan. It was just a last-ditch animal instinct. He was slowing the car almost to a stop, pulling onto the gravel shoulder. "Wait!" I screamed. My voice was raw. "Look." He glanced back in the mirror, annoyed. "Look at what?" "Just look." I was pointing at my lap at the blood. "I'm bleeding. Look at me. I'm bleeding all over your car." His face changed instantly. The cold, predatory look in his eyes just vanished. It was replaced by pure sudden disgust. He grimaced, like he'd smelled something rotten. He stared at my lap for a second, then back at my face. He didn't say anything. He just slammed the gear shift into park and reached over to his master controls. I heard the thunk of my door lock disengaging. "Get out," he spat at me. "Get the hell out of my car now." I fumbled for the handle. This time it caught. I grabbed my backpack, fell out of the car onto the gravel road, and scrambled to my feet. He leaned over the passenger seat. "You breathe a word of this to anyone," he growled. "I will find you. I will come back, and I will finish this. You understand me?" I didn't answer. I just ran. I ran straight into the woods, into the total darkness. I didn't care about the branches scratching my face or the thorns tearing at my jeans. I could hear my own panicked breathing. I was sure I was going to hear a gunshot that he'd just shoot me in the back. I dove behind a huge, wide tree and crouched down, holding my breath. I peeked around the trunk, shaking so hard I could barely see straight. His car just sat there for what felt like an eternity. Then his reverse lights came on. He did a fast, angry three-point turn on the narrow road and sped off back toward the highway. I stayed behind that tree until his taillights were gone, and then I stayed for another 10 minutes just shaking and crying, my jeans cold and sticky. Finally, I made my way back to the road. I was in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea where I was. I just picked a direction and started walking. About 20 minutes later, I saw headlights. I almost jumped back into the woods, terrified it was him. But it was a big, boxy truck, a bread truck, making early morning deliveries. I jumped right into the middle of the road, waving my arms. The driver, this older guy with a kind face, slammed on his brakes. He saw the state I was in, covered in dirt, leaves, and blood. He just opened the passenger door. "Get in," Kitty said. "You're safe." He took me straight to the nearest police station. I gave them my report. They were nice, but I could tell they knew they'd never find him. A dark sedan, no plate, on a dark road. He was a ghost. 6 years passed. I finished school, and I never ever hitchhiked again. I was at home one night just flipping through channels. I landed on an HBO special. It was a true crime documentary, something like Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer. They were showing an interview with a man in a prison jumpsuit talking to a psychiatrist. I dropped the remote. It was him. My blood turned to ice all over again. I couldn't breathe. It was his face, his voice, those same empty eyes. He was on death row. He was calmly recounting his conquests, the women he'd raped, the women he'd murdered. He talked about them like they were objects. I have actively, forcefully forgotten his name. I refuse to keep it in my head, but I will never ever forget his face. I learned later that what happened to me is a real documented phenomenon. In moments of acute life or death stress, a woman's body can do it. It can force an immediate, heavy, unscheduled menstruation. It's a primal biological defense. That's what saved me. Not my pleading, not my non-existent phone. My own body did the one thing that could turn that. I hit that button. Click. I don't care who's walking by. I don't stop for people on the side of the road ever. It's not because I'm a bad person. It's because of Dr. Evans. My college wasn't anything fancy. It was a sprawling state university in North Florida. All flat-roofed concrete buildings from the 1970s and huge old oak trees that dripped Spanish moss. I was a sophomore, taking Criminology 203. It was one of those big, boring lecture classes in a giant auditorium with fold-down wooden seats. Dr. Evans was the professor. He was this older guy, always looked tired, and he had a quiet, raspy voice that made it hard to stay awake. He'd been a criminal psychologist for 20 years before he started teaching. Usually, he'd just drone on about statistics and case studies. But one Tuesday, we were talking about victim selection, and the class was dead silent. Everyone either dozing or texting. Dr. Evans just stopped mid. He took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and looked out over the 200 of us. "You all look at this like it's just numbers," he rasped, his voice suddenly clearer. "You think you can spot a monster? You think they wear a sign? They don't. Sometimes they just look pathetic." The room was suddenly very, very still. "This didn't happen to me," he said, "but to a close friend of mine years ago, down near a... He was a salesman. Drove all over the state. A good-hearted guy. Too good. Good. Maybe he was on a long 2-lane stretch of highway, one of those roads that cuts right through the Ocala National Forest. It's just pine trees and swamp for an hour straight. It was late, maybe 11 at night, and it was hot. One of those thick, humid Florida nights. My friend, we'll call him Ted, he was just trying to get home, and his headlights cut through the dark and landed on a figure walking on the gravel shoulder. Ted saw him, and his first instinct was to just keep going. But as he got closer, he slowed down. The man looked awful, just disheveled and ragged. His clothes were torn. He was covered in dirt, and he looked just bone-weary, like he couldn't take another step. So Ted pulled over, he told himself. The guy's car must have broken down. The man shuffled up and pulled the door open. A wave of smell hit Ted. It was sour, pine needles, and something coppery, like old pennies. The man collapsed into the passenger seat. He was young, maybe 25, with matted hair and these wide, exhausted eyes. "Thanks," the man hissed. "Car breaks down," Ted asked, pulling back onto the empty road. "Something like that." The man mumbled, "Just need to get to a gas station. Anywhere." They drove in silence for a few minutes. The only sound was the tires on the pavement. Ted started to feel that cold, prickly feeling on the back of his neck. The man was just staring straight ahead, breathing heavily through his nose. "Where are you heading?" the man asked. "I'm going all the way to St. Augustine," Ted told him. The man turned his head. His eyes were dark, and they looked empty. "St. Augustine? That's far. I should just go with you. I should just go where you're going." Ted laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. I don't know, man. My wife's waiting up. I just figured I'd drop you off at the next town, at the 24-hour truck stop." The man didn't seem to hear him. He just kept staring at Ted. "They wouldn't stop talking," he said. Ted glanced at him. "What's that?" "My parents. They never stopped. Said I was lazy. Said I was no good. Said I was a mistake. Just on and on. All day, every day. It was so loud in my head. Always so loud." Ted's hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. He was in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't another car for miles. "Tonight I was fixing the fence," the man continued, his voice dreamy like he was remembering a movie. "Dad came out, started again, yelling. I just had the tool in my hand. He was so loud I had to make him stop." Ted was sweating. He could feel the cold AC blasting, but he was sweating. He wanted to step on the gas to just floor it. Mom came out. She saw, and she just started screaming louder than him. So loud I had to make her stop, too. She wouldn't stop screaming. Dr. Evans paused. He looked around the room, making eye contact with us. My friend Ted was terrified. He didn't know what to do. He was trapped in a metal box doing 60 meters an hour with this person. "It was messy," the man said. He sounded surprised. "It gets all over you." Then the man reached slowly into the waistband of his dirty jeans. Ted flinched, his foot hovering over the brake. The man pulled out a knife. It wasn't a pocket knife. It was a thick, heavy-bladed utility knife, the kind you use for cutting leather or wires. The handle was wrapped in black tape, and the blade was dark. It was covered in something thick and dark, and bits of grass and stuff were sticking to it. It was a bloody knife. "See?" the man said, holding it up in the dim light from the dashboard. Just then, up ahead, Ted saw a flicker of neon. A single, isolated gas station, one of those tiny ones at a crossroads. It was like a miracle. Ted's voice was shaking, but he tried to sound normal. "Hey, look! There's a place right there. You said you needed a gas station, right?" He pulled off the highway, the tires crunching on the gravel lot. He stopped right in front of the brightly lit door. The man just sat there for a second looking at the knife. Then he looked at Ted. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired. "Yeah, this is good." He opened the car door, got out, and just walked away. He didn't run. He just walked around the side of the building with the bloody knife still in his hand and disappeared into the pitch-black darkness. Tet. Sat. Tet. Sat. Police, of course, but by the time they got out there, the man was long gone. Ted sold that car. He said he couldn't get the smell out, and he told me he has never for any reason stopped for a stranger on the side of the road again. The class bell rang and it made me jump. I still think about that story every time I drive at night. I used to do a lot of hitchhiking back in the day. It was just a cheap way to get around, and most of the time you meet interesting, normal people. But this one trip, this was the one that made me stop for good. I was in Pennsylvania trying to get to Ohio. The day before had been beautiful, sunny, a perfect spring day. So naturally, I was dressed for it, just shorts and a t-shirt. But this is Pennsylvania we're talking about. I woke up, and it was like a monsoon, just a cold driving rain that soaked me to the bone in about 30 seconds. I was standing on the side of some two-lane highway, shivering, holding my thumb out, just desperate. After maybe an hour, this older sedan pulls over. The driver is a woman, maybe in her late 30s. I look in the car, and there are 3 other women inside, 1 in the passenger seat, 2 in the back. Honestly, a car full of women is usually a good sign. It feels safer. You know, I jog up to the window, and the driver rolls it down. "Where are you headed?" she asks. "Just trying to get to Ohio, but honestly, the state border would be amazing," I said. "Get in," she said. I threw my backpack in the back and squeezed in. I'm telling them, thank you. Just relieved to be out of the rain, which is now coming down so hard you can barely see. As I'm settling in, I notice something. The girl in the front passenger seat, she's got one of those thick black governmentist trackers on her ankle, like 4 house arrests or parole. My brain just filed that away. Okay, maybe they're on parole. No big deal. I'll just be polite, keep the conversation simple, and get out at the border. We drive for about 20 minutes, and the driver says, "I gotta stop for gas." We pull into a regular gas station. The driver gets out, starts pumping the gas. The other 3 girls in the car are just sitting there. 1 is on her phone. The other 2 are just staring out the window. The vibe in the car is weird, silent. Then the driver finishes at the pump, but instead of getting back in, she walks to the back of the car and opens the trunk. I'm just sitting there trying to warm up. I hear her talking to someone. And then I hear a man's voice. It's muffled and it's coming from inside the trunk. He sounds panicked. He yells, "Let go of me, you creep." I froze. I looked at the 2 girls in the back with me. They didn't even flinch, didn't look at each other. Nothing. Then I heard it. A single flat pop. It wasn't loud, not like in a movie. It was just a sharp, sudden noise. The trunk slams shut. The driver walks back to the gas pump, hangs up the nozzle like she's just finished any normal fill-up, and gets back in the car. She starts the engine. She even looks in the rearview mirror, catches my eye, and gives me a little smile. All said, we pull out of the gas station. As we're driving away, I look back, and I swear to you, I saw a guy on the ground by the pumps, just lying there. He was bleeding. I whipped my head back around, my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to break my ribs. I'm looking at the other passengers. They're just sitting there. Total silence, as if absolutely nothing just happened. I didn't say a word. What could I say? I was trapped in a car with 4 women who just, I don't know, shot someone in their trunk at a public gas station and didn't even blink. We drove for maybe another half hour. Just the sound of the windshield wipers and the rain. Then the driver pulls over again. This time we're on the side of the road, middle of nowhere with a huge dense forest on our right. "Got some business to take care of," she says. She gets out. All the other girls get out, too. The trunk opens again. I'm trying not to look. I'm just staring straight ahead, but I see them out of the corner of my eye. The driver pulls out a shovel. One of the other girls pulls out a big black plastic bag, like a heavy-duty lawn bag, and something in the bag was moving just slightly. It was squirming. Then all 4 of them just walked into the woods and disappeared. I was left alone in the car. I tried the door. Locked. I sat there for 2 hours. 2 whole hours. Just staring at the spot where they went in. The rain was finally letting up, but it was getting dark. My mind was racing. Should I try to break the window? Where would I run? They have a car. They had a cheval. Then they came back. Their shoes were covered in mud. They didn't have the shovel and they didn't have the bag. They all got in the car. Nobody said a word. The driver just started the engine, and we headed back on our way. We drove for another hour. Total silence. By now, it's pitch black outside. Then the driver turns off the highway, down a dark, muddy, dirt road deep into the woods again. She parks the car, kills the engine. It was so quiet, all I could hear was my own breathing. She turned around in her seat. She looked me straight in the eye. She had this blank, empty look. And then she said, "You're next." I didn't say anything. I just reacted. I slammed my hand on the door handle. It was unlocked this time, and I threw myself out of the car. I fell into the mud, scrambled up, and just bolted into the woods. I ran. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. I could hear car doors opening behind me, but I didn't look back. I just ran, branches scraping my face, tripping over roots in the dark. I must have run 4 miles. I finally burst out of the trees and onto another road. I looked up, and there was a sign, "Welcome to Ohio, the state border." I flagged down the first pair of headlights I saw. It was a cab driver just finishing his shift. I must have looked like a maniac, covered in mud, soaking wet, still in shorts and a t-shirt. I told him I got robbed and lost in the woods. I paid him every dollar I had to take me to the nearest town. From that point on, for the rest of my trip, I always arranged for a cab, and I've never ever hitchhiked again.